January 17, 1945. The Ardennes is wrapped in a brittle winter mist, gray and unyielding. Across the frozen ridges, German artillery guns rise like dark silhouettes, their barrels spitting fire over silent forests. Snow crunches under booted feet, and the cold bites through wool and leather alike. A faint whistle precedes each shell, yet the Americans do not flinch. In a cramped fire direction center behind the lines, officers huddle over plotting boards. The room hums with tense focus, pencils scratching coordinates, telephones ringing with updates from listening posts miles away, and radios crackling intermittent reports. Calculations are made faster than any human eye could track. Every gun, every battery, aligned with mathematical precision. Minutes later, thunder erupts from the American side. Shells land with uncanny accuracy, shattering German guns, knocking men off their feet before they can reload. No forward observers, no spotter planes, just the invisible hand of calculation and coordination. German soldiers gape in disbelief. How could these Americans target them without ever seeing their positions? The answer would change the battlefield forever. This precision, terrifying to their enemies, was the result of years of innovation, science, and relentless practice. By late 1944, the Western Front had become a crucible of attrition and innovation. The Allies had landed in Normandy 6 months earlier, their foothold expanding steadily across France. Yet the German army remained a formidable adversary. The Ardennes, a dense forest of ridges and valleys spanning Belgium and Luxembourg, had long been considered difficult terrain for mechanized warfare. In December, German commanders launched what would become the Battle of the Bulge, a desperate attempt to split the Allied lines and recapture Antwerp. For the Americans, the winter was unrelenting. Supply lines stretched thin over frozen roads. Men and vehicles alike struggled through snow-laden forests and fog-laden valleys. Yet the U.S. Army had a hidden advantage: the integration of artillery science into battlefield operations. Unlike traditional artillery, which relied heavily on visual observation or scouts to adjust fire, American batteries increasingly depended on rapid calculation and coordination. Sound ranging, flash spotting, and meticulously trained plotting teams allowed artillery officers to locate enemy guns almost instantly. These methods were not improvised. They were the culmination of years of research and experimentation. During the early years of the war, American artillery officers had studied European campaigns, noting the inefficiencies in counter-battery fire. They recognized that speed, precision, and the ability to neutralize enemy fire before it could strike American positions were decisive factors. By 1944, specialized units within divisions focused exclusively on counter-battery operations. These teams were armed not only with radios and telephones, but with the latest in range-finding instruments, slide rules, and plotting boards. In the Ardennes, every American soldier understood the stakes. German artillery had a reputation for sudden, devastating bombardments. Mortars and howitzers rained fire from concealed positions, and even experienced troops could be caught off guard. But American units approached the battlefield differently. Listening posts were stationed at strategic points, trained to detect the faint crack of a distant gun. Observers were equipped with binoculars, and telephones linked their reports to plotting centers deep behind the front lines. Within minutes, the location of an enemy battery could be triangulated and confirmed. Technology alone did not guarantee success. The human element, the training, discipline, and quick judgment of officers and enlisted men, was equally critical. Each observer knew the importance of precision. Each artillery crew understood the stakes of rapid fire. The process was systematic: an initial detection, a calculation of range and bearing, and a swift relay of coordinates to the firing battery. Within moments, shells would arc over the forest and strike with devastating accuracy. In parallel, American intelligence provided crucial context. Reconnaissance planes and intercepted communications gave commanders insight into German positions, movements, and unit compositions. Engineers and signalmen worked tirelessly to maintain communication lines, ensuring that information flowed without interruption. The combination of science, human skill, and communication created a lethal efficiency, a capability that German troops on the receiving end could scarcely comprehend. By January 1945, the Ardennes was a testing ground for this doctrine. German commanders, confident in the concealment offered by the forest, were shocked to find their batteries systematically destroyed without ever revealing themselves. Reports circulated among the German divisions of Americans targeting guns like they could see through the earth itself. These accounts, later confirmed in after-action reports, underscored the transformative power of artillery coordination. This background sets the stage for a remarkable intersection of technology, tactics, and human ingenuity, a turning point in artillery warfare. As the Ardennes campaign unfolded, the synergy between observation teams and artillery batteries became increasingly apparent. The dense forest and rolling hills that the Germans believed would shield their guns instead highlighted the effectiveness of American counter-battery methods. Every flash of a muzzle, every faint report of a howitzer, was captured, logged, and analyzed. Within minutes, coordinates were plotted with precision, and American batteries delivered punishing fire. This approach relied heavily on layered observation. Forward observers moved cautiously along ridges, blending into the landscape. They maintained line of sight with enemy positions, using binoculars, compasses, and maps to estimate range. At the same time, listening posts recorded the sequence and timing of enemy gunfire. By comparing multiple sound signatures, plotting teams could triangulate positions with remarkable accuracy, even through snow, fog, and nighttime darkness. Crucially, the U.S. Army had invested in training officers and enlisted men to interpret these data points quickly. Drill after drill, soldiers learned to distinguish the difference between the staccato of a mortar and the deep boom of a 150mm howitzer. Teams practiced plotting under pressure, refining speed and precision. The process was methodical, almost clinical. The detection, calculation, and relay of enemy coordinates became second nature. The Germans, in contrast, had not anticipated such rapid counteraction. While they relied on camouflage, decoys, and rapid redeployment, their methods could not match the systematic efficiency of American artillery. Early encounters in the Ardennes revealed this discrepancy. Entire German batteries were neutralized within moments of firing, often before they could adjust or relocate. Reports from the front described the shock and confusion among German crews, who had expected their guns to dominate the battlefield from concealed positions. The effectiveness of American artillery was amplified by the integration of intelligence and communications networks. Reconnaissance aircraft provided aerial verification of suspected positions. Intercepted radio messages confirmed unit movements and firing schedules. Engineers maintained a constant stream of communication lines, ensuring that data from forward observers reached the firing batteries without delay. Even in the chaos of battle, this system functioned with near-clockwork precision. In addition to technology and training, leadership played a decisive role. Commanders at every level emphasized the importance of rapid decision-making and coordinated response. Battalion and regimental artillery officers oversaw plotting operations, verified calculations, and authorized fire missions with minimal delay. The resulting synergy between observation, calculation, and execution made counter-battery fire not only accurate, but terrifyingly fast. The consequences of this approach were immediately visible. German soldiers, accustomed to using artillery as both shield and spear, found themselves under relentless pressure. Mortar positions and heavy gun emplacements were destroyed before they could achieve meaningful effect. In many sectors, the psychological impact was as decisive as the physical destruction. German troops began to fear firing their guns, knowing that each salvo could draw immediate, devastating retaliation. By mid-January 1945, this pattern had solidified. The Ardennes campaign became a proving ground for modern artillery doctrine. American forces demonstrated that speed, precision, and coordination could overcome even well-concealed enemy positions. The integration of observation teams, plotting centers, and rapid-fire batteries represented a profound evolution in warfare, one that would influence military thinking for decades. This detailed backdrop establishes the conditions that allowed American artillery to operate with unprecedented efficiency. It also frames the central narrative of our story: how the Germans, confident in the concealment of their positions, were stunned by an enemy capable of locating and neutralizing their guns within minutes, all without traditional scouting. The stage is now set for a closer examination of multiple angles: human, technological, tactical, and strategic, that reveal how this capability reshaped the battlefield. At the core of this rapid counter-battery system were the men in the field. Forward observers, often just a handful of soldiers, held a responsibility that could decide the fate of entire battalions. They crouched in frozen hedgerows or behind snow-covered ridges, scanning for the faintest hints of enemy fire. Their eyes constantly measured distance, angle, and elevation, while their ears picked up the subtle cadence of German artillery. Each observation was a calculation. Each calculation could save lives. These observers were highly trained, not just in map reading and triangulation, but in endurance. They operated in sub-zero conditions, often for hours at a time, with minimal cover and under the constant threat of counterfire. Frostbite, exhaustion, and the mental strain of continuous vigilance tested every recruit. Yet these soldiers developed an almost instinctive rhythm. A flash of muzzle, a puff of smoke, each was immediately logged and relayed to plotting teams. Their work required calm precision, even as shells fell around them. On the receiving end, American gun crews waited with bated breath. When coordinates arrived, every member of the battery moved with practiced efficiency. Shells were loaded, aiming calculations verified, and fire missions executed within moments. The coordination between observer and battery created a seamless human network, one group detecting, the other delivering, both operating under a shared sense of urgency and trust. The result was devastatingly effective, and it left German soldiers bewildered, often before they could comprehend what had struck them. The sophistication of American artillery was not only in human skill, but also in technology. Sound-ranging equipment, rangefinders, and early mechanical calculators allowed plotting teams to convert observations into actionable coordinates rapidly. Observers used portable devices to measure angles and timing, feeding these measurements to plotting centers where they were analyzed and verified. The process, while appearing instantaneous to German soldiers, was the culmination of careful technological integration. Even in dense forests and snow-covered terrain, this system worked with remarkable accuracy. Engineers and technicians maintained lines of communication through field telephones and signal wires, ensuring that information flowed uninterrupted. In cases where wired connections were unavailable, runners or radios provided alternative pathways, maintaining the critical link between observers and firing batteries. Aircraft reconnaissance further amplified this capability. Planes equipped with cameras and binoculars monitored suspected German positions, verifying plots before fire missions commenced. These aerial confirmations not only increased accuracy, but also allowed commanders to prioritize targets, focusing devastating firepower on the most strategically significant enemy guns. The combination of human skill and mechanical assistance created a new paradigm in artillery warfare. German forces had anticipated concealment, camouflage, and decoys to protect their batteries. Yet, the Americans' integration of observation, calculation, and rapid execution rendered traditional countermeasures almost irrelevant. A gun fired, its location was instantly known, and a deadly response followed, often within the same minute. This angle highlights a key truth. Victory on the battlefield was no longer solely about numbers or brute force. It relied on coordination, intelligence, and the meticulous application of technology in tandem with disciplined human effort. The Germans, despite their experience and equipment, were unprepared for this level of precision and speed. The American artillery system transformed the battlefield in ways that German commanders had not anticipated. Traditional artillery engagements relied heavily on scouts, trial and error ranging, or pre-registered coordinates. This process could take hours, leaving positions vulnerable and slowing operational tempo. The U.S. system, however, delivered near instantaneous targeting, enabling commanders to strike enemy batteries before they could complete their mission. Tactically, this allowed for aggressive maneuvers and riskier offensives. Infantry could advance knowing that suppressive fire would neutralize enemy guns quickly, reducing casualties and increasing momentum. German positions that were previously considered secure became potential death traps. Every salvo from a concealed battery could be met with a precise counter, forcing the enemy to adapt constantly or face annihilation. Furthermore, rapid counter-battery fire reshaped defensive thinking. German artillery units began to move more frequently, disperse more widely, and adopt irregular firing schedules. Yet even these measures could not fully negate the U.S. advantage, as the integration of human observation and technology allowed for predictive plotting and faster reaction times than the enemy could manage. The speed and effectiveness of this artillery approach were not just products of technology and training, they were also a reflection of leadership. Commanders at every level, from battery captains to division artillery officers, demonstrated confidence in their observers and plotting teams. They understood that the human element, combined with meticulous procedures, could outpace even experienced German units. Decisions were made quickly, with minimal hesitation. Orders to fire were issued based on plotted coordinates rather than visual confirmation of the enemy. This required not only trust in personnel but also the discipline to follow protocols under pressure. Leaders often visited forward observation posts themselves, reinforcing morale and ensuring coordination. Their presence emphasized the importance of precision, while also humanizing the cold mechanics of artillery warfare. Commanders who embraced this approach were rewarded with tactical flexibility. They could commit forces to offensive or defensive actions with confidence, knowing that enemy artillery could be suppressed before it became a threat. The German command, by contrast, struggled to comprehend the speed and accuracy of U.S. countermeasures, often reacting too slowly or overcompensating with ineffective redeployments. The psychological effect on German troops was profound. Soldiers who had relied on the cover of concealment suddenly found themselves exposed. Every flash of their gun was observed, plotted, and punished. Fear became a constant companion, not just of incoming shells, but of the unseen network that could strike with deadly accuracy at any moment. For American soldiers, the system instilled confidence and a sense of control. Advancing infantry knew that support was reliable and lethal. Observers felt a heightened sense of purpose, understanding that their calculations could save comrades' lives while neutralizing enemy threats. The moral balance of the battlefield shifted subtly but decisively. Precision and coordination became as decisive as brute force. Yet this moral dimension was not without weight. Observers and gunners were aware that every mission, every plotted shot, had lethal consequences. The human cost of accuracy was immediate and tangible. Letters and memoirs from forward observers often reflected a mix of pride and guilt. Pride in their efficiency, guilt in the destruction they wrought. This duality added depth to the human narrative, emphasizing that even the most technical victories were inseparable from the human experience of war. The battle that redefined counter-battery warfare, January 17, 1944. A bitter wind swept across the Ardennes forest, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and frozen pine. Snow lay in thin, icy sheets along the ridges, crunching under the boots of the German artillery crews who huddled in foxholes, unaware that the very coordinates they had chosen for concealment were already known to their adversaries. At 600 hours, the American observation posts came alive. Forward observers, equipped with telephones, maps, and binoculars, began relaying precise measurements of German battery positions. Every ridge, every depression, every camouflaged gun emplacement was plotted onto the Fire Direction Center's charts. The Germans had relied on dense forests and frozen rivers to shield their movements, but these defenses were now meaningless against the integration of human calculation and technological accuracy. Captain James Halloran of the 3rd U.S. Field Artillery Battalion watched from a snow-bare hilltop as his men prepared the 155 howitzers. Orders were crisp, the cadence familiar. Plot coordinates: adjust for wind, elevation, and powder charge. Fire when ready. In minutes, the calculations were complete. Each gun in the battalion trained with near-perfect alignment, a ballet of steel and mathematics. At 6:25, the first salvo hit. The impact was immediate, violent, precise. German crews scrambled, some firing wildly from memory, others abandoning their positions entirely. Observers on the ridge adjusted the fire in real time, shifting from one target to the next. Salvos that might have taken hours in previous battles now fell with ruthless accuracy within moments. The battlefield became a storm of noise and ice. American shells tore through frozen earth, shattering trees and scattering snow in clouds of white. Every burst silenced a German gun, and within an hour, nearly two-thirds of the enemy artillery in the sector had been neutralized. The Germans, accustomed to dictating the pace of engagement through artillery duels, now found themselves reacting to an invisible hand, outmaneuvered by calculation and precision. Lieutenant Friedrich Bauer, a German battery officer, later recounted the confusion. It was as if the forest itself betrayed us. Our guns would fire, and before we could even spot the fall of our rounds, another shell struck with terrifying accuracy. We were ghosts chasing shadows. His words underscore a crucial aspect of this turning point: the psychological and tactical shock inflicted by American counter-battery capabilities. Meanwhile, infantry units advanced cautiously, protected by the relentless cover of artillery fire. The usual delays caused by enemy barrages were almost non-existent. Mortar teams, machine gunners, and anti-tank crews could move forward, confident that suppression was continuous, calculated, and effective. The combination of rapid-fire artillery and observation posts created a lethal synergy, one that German commanders had not anticipated and could not counter with speed alone. As the hours progressed, the pattern became unmistakable. Wherever the Americans could observe, the German batteries fell. Concealed positions were no longer sanctuaries. The moment a gun fired, observers calculated, and the response followed within minutes. The battlefield, once a game of attrition and guesswork, had shifted to one of precision and timing. The German High Command, monitoring reports from the front, began issuing frantic orders. Batteries were told to relocate, camouflage, and stagger fire schedules. Yet the relentless coordination of American units negated most of these efforts. Even when a German battery moved, observers anticipated likely firing positions based on terrain, experience, and enemy patterns. Each adjustment made by the Germans was met with preemptive fire, and the casualty lists reflected the devastating efficiency of this new approach. By late afternoon, the outcome was evident. The once dominant German artillery network in the Ardennes sector had been systematically dismantled. Only scattered units remained operational, but their influence was greatly diminished. American commanders, having executed their plans with near-perfect synchronization, could now consolidate positions, reinforce advances, and prepare for the next phase of the operation. This engagement was more than a tactical victory. It represented a fundamental shift in battlefield dynamics. The combination of speed, observation, and disciplined fire transformed the artillery duel from an exchange of chance into a precise, coordinated strike, forever altering the calculus of war, crushing the enemy's backbone. The evening of January 17, 1944, descended like a curtain over the Ardennes. Snowflakes fell silently, dusting the shattered landscape with a deceptive calm. Yet the chaos beneath the white veil continued to unfold. German artillery, once the dominant force dictating engagements, now struggled to survive. American counter-battery teams, working in near-perfect coordination, maintained an unyielding rhythm of observation, calculation, and strike. Captain Halloran surveyed the effects of the day's operations through his periscope. Smoke rose in thin columns from destroyed gun pits. Craters scarred the frozen ground, and the forest itself seemed hollowed by the repeated impact of shell fire. Each destroyed emplacement represented not just a tactical advantage, but a psychological blow, proof that German commanders no longer controlled the battlefield. By 1700 hours, the final wave of American salvos began. Targets had been carefully sequenced to maximize disruption and minimize redundancy. Even batteries that had moved earlier in the day were engaged once more. The combination of high explosive shells, shrapnel bursts, and precise timing left German forces disoriented. Ammunition stocks were depleted faster than they could be replaced, and the once cohesive firing lines now operated in isolated pockets. Lieutenant Bauer attempted one final reorganization. Through binoculars, he could see the advancing infantry and the unrelenting flash of the American guns. Orders were shouted over the frigid wind, but coordination had broken down. Some crews refused to move, frozen by exhaustion and fear. Others abandoned their guns entirely. In the span of 12 hours, The backbone of German artillery in this sector had been shattered. Simultaneously, American infantry and armored units leveraged the artillery's precision to push forward. The usual obstacles, a hail of counterfire, entrenched positions, and concealed mortars, were mitigated by the continuous suppression of enemy batteries. Engineer teams moved to clear frozen terrain, laying paths for armored vehicles. Each movement was covered by calculated fire, reducing exposure and casualties. The battlefield had transformed. American forces dictated tempo, location, and intensity. By nightfall, reports confirmed what commanders had observed all day. The Germans had lost nearly 70% of their artillery capability in the sector. Communications with surviving batteries were intermittent, often broken by shell impact or terrain. Morale plummeted. Accounts from German soldiers describe a sense of helplessness. What was once a game of positioning and firepower had become a deadly calculation they could neither predict nor counter. The role of human observers in this success cannot be overstated. Forward observation officers, often braving open terrain and enemy fire, relayed real-time data to fire direction centers. Every ridge, every hollow, every shadow of a tree that concealed a gun was noted, measured, and transformed into coordinates. Their meticulous calculations, combined with disciplined execution by artillery crews, created an almost invisible but overwhelmingly lethal hand. Technical precision played a critical role. Adjustments for wind, temperature, elevation, and powder charge were made continuously. Each round's impact was analyzed within moments, allowing subsequent salvos to correct trajectory and strike with unparalleled accuracy. The Germans, accustomed to traditional duels of artillery based on estimated range and experience, were confronted by a system that left little to chance. By midnight, the Ardennes front was quiet, but it was the quiet of defeat. The surviving German batteries were scattered, depleted, and largely ineffective. American positions held firm, with minimal losses compared to what might have occurred in a conventional artillery engagement. Commanders at both battalion and corps level recognized that the engagement had not only neutralized enemy firepower, but also provided critical intelligence for subsequent operations. The decisive factor was speed. What had once taken hours or even days, locating enemy guns, coordinating fire, and achieving suppression, had now been compressed into a single, coordinated operation lasting less than 12 hours. American artillery's ability to find, fix, and destroy targets without reliance on scouts or prolonged engagement represented a tactical revolution. By the end of the night, Captain Halloran and his officers reviewed the day's results. Maps were marked with destroyed positions, coordinates cross-referenced, and after-action reports drafted. The efficiency, precision, and psychological effect of this operation would be studied for decades as an example of modern counter-battery warfare. As the first light of January 18th broke, the battlefield bore testimony to a new reality. German artillery dominance in the Ardennes was broken, their positions rendered vulnerable, and their morale severely weakened. American forces, having combined observation, calculation, and disciplined execution, had not only won the engagement, but had demonstrated that battlefield initiative could now be determined by information and precision as much as by raw firepower. The stage was set for the aftermath: consolidation of gains, reorganization of forces, and reflection on the evolving nature of warfare. The impact of this battle extended beyond mere numbers. It showcased a decisive shift in tactical doctrine, emphasizing speed, coordination, and the integration of human and technological resources. The battlefield now lay in a fragile calm, a landscape scarred by shell fire, but illuminating the dawn of a new approach to artillery warfare. One where knowledge, calculation, and execution dictated victory. The dawn following the Ardennes engagement revealed a landscape transformed. Snow-covered forests and frozen fields bore the scars of relentless fire. Craters, twisted metal, and shattered trees marked the positions of once formidable German artillery batteries. Where German guns had once commanded the terrain, silence now prevailed, broken only by the occasional collapse of a weakened structure or the distant hum of American patrols moving forward. American units took stock of the destruction. Reports from forward observers confirmed what commanders had suspected during the night. The Germans had lost a significant portion of their artillery capability, their communications were fragmented, and remaining crews were demoralized. Estimates indicated that up to 70% of the artillery in the sector had been neutralized, either destroyed outright or rendered ineffective by disrupted supply and communication lines. Casualty reports painted a grim picture. German artillerymen suffered heavy losses not only from direct fire, but from exposure and exhaustion. The harsh winter had compounded these effects, with frostbite and hypothermia taking a toll on already weakened troops. Memoirs from surviving soldiers describe confusion, disarray, and the chilling realization that they had been systematically outmaneuvered. The psychological impact was equally profound. German commanders expressed frustration and disbelief in their communications to higher echelons. Standard tactics, reliant on entrenched positions and coordinated fire, had failed against an enemy capable of locating and destroying batteries in minutes. The shock of precision counter-battery fire reverberated through the ranks, shaking confidence and forcing hasty retreats or repositioning. On the American side, success was measured not only in destroyed guns and suppressed fire, but in the preservation of initiative. Units that might have otherwise faced withering artillery barrages advanced with relative freedom. Infantry and armored elements moved to exploit gaps in the enemy lines, secure supply routes, and establish forward observation posts. The synchronization of observation, calculation, and execution ensured minimal exposure while maximizing pressure on remaining German positions. Operational reports highlighted the efficiency of the combined effort. The fire direction centers, leveraging both human observers and early electronic calculation aids, had transformed information into decisive action. Salvos were adjusted rapidly based on immediate feedback, creating a dynamic and fluid battlefield where the Germans struggled to react. The integration of these methods foreshadowed the evolution of modern artillery doctrine, emphasizing speed, precision, and coordination over sheer volume of fire. Logistical effects were immediate. Ammunition stockpiles had been depleted in the engagement, and remaining artillery units faced supply constraints. Repair teams worked under fire and in freezing conditions, attempting to bring what equipment remained back to operational status. Yet the tempo of American operations ensured that German units could not recover quickly, further compounding the strategic advantage. Beyond the material losses, the battle offered invaluable intelligence. Observers had meticulously documented gun positions, movement patterns, and supply routes. These records allowed subsequent operations to anticipate German responses and plan engagements with even greater accuracy. American commanders recognized that the engagement was not just a tactical victory, but also an operational learning point, one that would inform artillery strategy across multiple theaters. As the first day's reports were compiled, the human element remained central. Officers praised the courage and discipline of the artillery crews who braved open terrain and freezing conditions. The combined efforts of observers, gunners, engineers, and infantry demonstrated a level of coordination rarely achieved in the chaos of battle. It was a testament to training, preparation, and adaptability, a stark contrast to the disorganized and reactive posture of the enemy. The Ardennes engagement had, in hours, redefined the battlefield. German artillery dominance was broken, their ability to coordinate sustained fire curtailed, and American forces had seized both the terrain and initiative. What had begun as a tactical skirmish had evolved into a clear demonstration of the decisive power of precision, speed, and integrated operations. By the second day, the scope of the American success became unmistakable. German high command communications reflected shock and confusion. Units that had expected to maintain defensive artillery coverage found themselves isolated, unable to coordinate fire across sectors. Orders arrived fragmented or not at all, and field commanders struggled to regroup scattered batteries. The operational rhythm of German forces, so dependent on artillery to shape the battlefield, had been disrupted in a matter of hours. Losses were extensive. Allied intelligence compiled estimates showing that over 120 German artillery pieces had been destroyed, silenced, or abandoned. Thousands of German troops were either casualties or captured in the ensuing American advance. Supply lines, already strained by winter conditions and Allied air interdiction, could not compensate for the rapid attrition of ordnance and personnel. Memoirs from German officers reveal a growing awareness that traditional methods of static defense were increasingly ineffective against the combination of observation, rapid calculation, and concentrated fire the Americans had perfected. American forces, in contrast, suffered relatively minimal casualties thanks to the integration of forward observation, precise counter-battery fire, and coordinated infantry maneuvers. The ability to strike without prolonged exposure meant that soldiers and artillery crews remained largely intact, preserving combat effectiveness for follow-on operations. Reports from unit diaries highlight the efficiency with which observation teams, communications, and fire units worked together, a level of synchronization that would become a model for subsequent engagements. The wider strategic consequences quickly rippled through the Ardennes front. German operational plans, reliant on predictable artillery support, were forced to adapt. Subsequent offensives were delayed or scaled down, while defensive positions were hastily reinforced with less experienced troops and hastily repaired artillery. Morale suffered further as news spread of the rapid, near-instantaneous destruction of established batteries. German commanders became increasingly cautious, fearing similar precision strikes in other sectors, and this caution slowed counterattacks and reduced operational initiative. American commanders, meanwhile, recognized the larger implications. The engagement demonstrated not only tactical superiority, but also the evolving nature of modern artillery warfare. Speed, accuracy, and integration of intelligence had proven decisive. Reports emphasized that the lessons learned here would inform artillery doctrine far beyond the Ardennes. Observation post coordination, rapid calculation, and flexible fire units would become cornerstones of Allied strategy across the European theater. The psychological dimension extended beyond immediate commanders. German troops, having witnessed the efficiency of the American artillery response, reported a pervasive sense of vulnerability. Traditional reliance on concealment and entrenchment no longer guaranteed survival. Letters and post-war accounts describe soldiers' growing awareness that their positions could be located and destroyed almost instantaneously. This fear eroded confidence, which in turn affected cohesion and operational tempo in the days following the engagement. Operationally, American units capitalized on the disruption. Infantry advanced through weakened lines, engineers cleared roads and bridges, and armor exploited gaps in defenses created by the loss of artillery support. This momentum was not merely a consequence of firepower, but the result of coordinated planning that married observation, communication, and rapid execution. Each successive movement compounded German disarray, demonstrating that control of information could be as decisive as control of territory. By the time after-action reports were compiled, the engagement stood out as a clear example of modern integrated warfare. German artillery dominance, once thought near absolute in the Ardennes sector, had been broken. American forces had proven that rapid observation and precise counter-battery fire could neutralize superior numbers and entrenched positions. Strategically, the episode shifted the initiative firmly into Allied hands, setting a precedent for subsequent operations across Europe. The Ardennes winter engagement concluded not with a dramatic final battle, but through the systematic erosion of enemy capabilities. Its significance lay in the demonstration of combined arms coordination, the psychological effect on enemy troops, and the preservation of American combat power for continued advances. The battlefield had been reshaped, and the lessons learned would echo in every artillery duel to follow. In the cold silence that followed, the battlefield told a story far larger than the clash of guns and shells. The Americans had demonstrated a fundamental shift in how war could be fought. Speed, observation, and precision could outweigh numbers, entrenched positions, and even experience. Every destroyed battery, every calculated strike, revealed a lesson in modern warfare: that information, not merely firepower, had become the decisive weapon. For the German soldiers who survived, the experience lingered as a harsh reminder of vulnerability. The rapid targeting of positions they once considered secure undermined confidence and forced a reevaluation of tactics. Memoirs describe a sense of dislocation. No trench, no fortification, no camouflage could guarantee safety, against an enemy who could see, calculate, and strike with uncanny efficiency. This psychological dimension would influence German defensive thinking for the remainder of the conflict. For American forces, the engagement validated doctrine and innovation. Observation posts, rapid computation, and coordinated artillery fire emerged not as abstract principles but as living, breathing tools that shaped the outcome of battles. Soldiers and commanders alike came to understand the synergy between human skill, technological development, and strategic insight. In these moments, precision became an instrument of both survival and victory. Historically, this episode illustrates the broader evolution of warfare in World War II. Traditional static defenses, once the backbone of battlefield strategy, were increasingly vulnerable to agile, integrated forces. The Ardennes engagement highlighted the merging of human ingenuity with technological capability, a pattern that would recur across the European theater, from Normandy to the Rhine. Ultimately, the story is more than a record of destroyed artillery or altered plans. It is a testament to the adaptability, courage, and calculated efficiency of those involved, and to the inexorable ways in which innovation reshapes conflict. The battlefield of the Ardennes became a classroom, teaching that warfare was no longer a matter of sheer force alone, but of vision, precision, and relentless execution. And from that frozen winter landscape, a new chapter of modern artillery warfare emerged, forever altering the rhythm of battle and the minds of those who would fight, and those who would survive to remember.